What if I told you that a black CEO, someone who had fought his entire life to break through barriers and build a successful businesses, was forced to give up his VIP seat on a plane just to make room for a white passenger? Sounds unbelievable, right? But that's exactly what happened to Lucas Owens, a CEO who had earned every bit of his success. He was told to move from his seat, not because of anything he did wrong, but because someone else, someone white, claimed it was his. What happened next wasn't just about a seat. It was about power, respect, and the racism still alive today that can strip away everything you've worked for in an instant. Stay tuned, because what happened next will leave you shocked. Welcome to Stories with Mr. Gray. If you love uncovering the truth and standing up for justice, hit subscribe and drop the flag of your country in the comments below. Lucas Owens didn't just wake up at the top. He built his empire from the bottom, starting with nothing but a vision and an unshakable belief in himself. Raised in a neighborhood where success was a dream for most, Lucas never stopped pushing. From his early days working multiple jobs just to pay for college, to starting his own company, every step of his journey was a fight against the odds. Over the years, Lucas proved that success wasn't about where you started, but how hard you fought for what you wanted. His companies, multi-million-dollar businesses with clients across the world. His reputation, unmatched. He became a symbol of what was possible when you refused to back down. But despite his success, Lucas knew the reality of being a black man in a world built on power and privilege. Even when you're at the top, there are forces that will never treat you the same. And this truth was about to hit him in a way he could never have imagined. So, when Lucas boarded that flight, expecting a simple, quiet ride home after a major business deal, he couldn't have known that this routine moment would turn into a fight for something much bigger than just a seat. Lucas Owens had already settled into his seat, ready to relax after a long day of business meetings. His seat, VIP first class, was exactly where he belonged. He'd earned it. This was his time to sit back and unwind. But then, just as the flight attendants were making their rounds, something happened that stopped Lucas cold. A voice came from behind him, demanding his attention. "Excuse me, sir. You're in my seat." The voice was firm, with no hint of uncertainty. Lucas, confused, turned around and saw a white passenger standing in the aisle, pointing at his seat. Lucas paused, unsure if he'd heard that right. He was in the seat he had been assigned, the seat that had been reserved for him. The boarding pass was right there, but the passenger didn't care. "I'm sorry," the passenger continued. "I'm supposed to sit there. You'll have to move." Lucas, now confused and irritated, tried to explain the situation. "This is my seat," he said, showing his boarding pass to the flight attendant nearby. "I was assigned this seat when I checked in." But the passenger, not budging, looked at the flight attendant and repeated his demand. The flight attendant, instead of verifying Lucas's claim, looked at him and said, "I'm afraid you'll have to give up your seat, sir." The words hit Lucas like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just about a seat. It wasn't a mistake. It was a clear-cut example of something much larger, racial privilege. The passenger, without a second thought, had assumed that Lucas, a black man, wasn't entitled to this spot. In that moment, Lucas realized that the system didn't care how far he'd come. It didn't matter how hard he worked, or how much respect he had earned. In their eyes, he wasn't the one who deserved that seat. And that thought, that realization, it stung more than any accusation or insult ever could. As the flight attendant insisted that Lucas should give up his seat, the atmosphere on the plane changed. What started as a minor misunderstanding was quickly turning into an all-out confrontation. Lucas, now standing in the aisle, tried to keep his voice steady, but it was clear. This wasn't just about a seat anymore. The flight attendant explained that the passenger had a special request, that this seat was somehow reserved for him, even though Lucas had shown his boarding pass, confirming it was his. The words felt like they were designed to dismiss him, to make him invisible, as if him being a black man didn't matter at all. Lucas looked at the flight attendant, and then back at the white passenger who now sat smugly, arms crossed. He could feel the frustration building like a pressure cooker. "I've been assigned this seat. I've done nothing wrong. Why am I being treated like this?" he asked, his voice trembling with barely contained anger. But the passenger didn't care. He wasn't backing down. In fact, he seemed emboldened by the flight attendant's compliance. "Look, I'm sorry, but this is my seat," the man said dismissively. "I don't know why you're making such a big deal out of this." For a brief moment, Lucas felt the sting of the world's injustices weigh on him. He wasn't just fighting for a seat anymore. He was fighting for his dignity, his respect. But the passenger and the crew continued to belittle him. Lucas's frustration turned to disbelief. How could this happen? How could his hard work, his position, his achievements not matter in a moment like this? He wasn't just any man on this plane, he was a CEO. He had the right to that seat. But in the eyes of the crew, his identity didn't seem to matter. He tried to keep his composure, but the emotion behind his words was clear. I've built an empire. I've broken barriers. And yet, I'm being treated like this. He stood his ground, but it was evident. This wasn't just a personal attack. It was a reflection of a system that still allowed this type of behavior to flourish. The pressure in the cabin was mounting. Passengers had begun to notice the situation unfolding. Some were watching in disbelief, others in silence, but the tension was undeniable. Lucas stood there, torn between doing what was expected of him as a CEO, remaining calm and composed, and the raw anger and frustration he felt at being treated like this. As the situation reached its boiling point, Lucas could feel the pressure building. But instead of lashing out, he did something no one on that plane expected. With the crew and the passengers still challenging him, Lucas stood tall, took a deep breath, and made a revelation that would change everything. You're asking me to give up my seat? The seat I've been assigned? Let me remind you, this seat is mine not just by the boarding pass, but by something much bigger. I'm Lucas Owens, the owner of this airline. The words hung in the air, and for a split second, the entire cabin went still. The white passenger, now visibly uncomfortable, fumbled for a response. The flight attendant looked at him and then at Lucas, her eyes wide with realization. The white passenger's earlier arrogance evaporated in an instant. He stared at Lucas, his mouth opening and closing as if searching for words, but none came. The realization hit him hard. He had just tried to push a black CEO off a seat on his own airline. At that moment, a senior crew member walked in. He looked at Lucas, then at the still stunned passenger, and without hesitation, spoke up. Mr. Owens,
I'm terribly sorry.
We should have handled this differently from the start. You're absolutely right. I should never have allowed this to happen. The passenger, too. The senior crew member's apology wasn't just a formality. It was genuine. He knew that he had failed in his duties, and worse, he had allowed an unjust situation to unfold simply because of the color of Lucas' skin. The white passenger, now clearly embarrassed and ashamed, stammered out an apology as well. I'm sorry, I didn't know. I was wrong. The weight of his words hung heavily in the air. Lucas didn't respond immediately. He didn't need to. The point had already been made. But he looked at the crew member and the passenger with a quiet resolve. I'm glad you're both finally seeing the truth, he said. But make no mistake, what happened here was not just a mistake. It was a direct reflection of how bias can shape people's actions, even in places where it should have no room. The crew member nodded, clearly remorseful. But there was one more thing left to address. The senior crew member said, Mr. Owens, I have to inform you that, in light of this situation, I will be taking the necessary steps to ensure this doesn't happen again. The crew member involved will be placed on suspension pending a full investigation. This behavior will not be tolerated in our airline. The apology, though late, was a step in the right direction. But Lucas wasn't finished. I hope this serves as a reminder to you all, he said, looking at both the crew and the passenger. The only thing that should matter in situations like this is fairness and respect. Today, I'm giving you both a lesson in what happens when you forget that. With the apology made and the matter addressed, Lucas finally sat back down, his seat rightfully his again. The atmosphere in the cabin shifted. What had started as an ugly confrontation had, in a strange way, become a moment of accountability. As Lucas settled in, he knew this wasn't just about a seat on a plane. This was about forcing a system to confront its biases and holding people accountable, no matter how powerful they thought they were. The following day, Lucas took immediate action. He called for a full review of the situation and initiated a meeting with the senior leadership team. The crew member who had mishandled the situation was placed on immediate suspension. Lucas was firm but fair. He made it clear that this kind of behavior was not just unacceptable but would not be tolerated in his company. He knew that the airline's reputation wasn't just about delivering quality service. It was about treating every single person with respect, regardless of their background or identity. The airline also made the decision to roll out a company-wide initiative, mandatory diversity and sensitivity training for all staff, from top executives to ground crew. Lucas understood that this wasn't just a one-time fix. It was about instilling lasting change in the culture of the airline. What happened wasn't just about addressing the incident. It was about making a commitment to a standard of equality and respect across the company. Lucas knew that leadership was about more than just overseeing operations. It was about setting the tone for how people should treat each other, both inside the company and in every passenger's experience. The crew member involved in the incident, after the internal review, acknowledged his mistakes and took full responsibility. His actions, though not malicious, had been rooted in biases he hadn't recognized himself. The suspension was not only a necessary step but a chance for him to reflect and grow. The white passenger also reached out personally to Lucas, offering his apology. He admitted his behavior had been wrong, and that it had stemmed from a sense of entitlement he hadn't fully realized. Though his apology couldn't undo the moment, it showed that accountability could come from unexpected places. For Lucas, this wasn't just about a seat on a plane. It was about standing up for fairness, setting an example, and using his position as CEO to create a culture of respect within his company. He knew that leadership wasn't about power, it was about responsibility. And today, he had taken that responsibility to heart. Lucas Owens didn't just prove that he was a successful CEO. He proved that true leadership means challenging the biases and inequities that persist in our society. By taking action, by leading with integrity, he showed everyone that respect and fairness must come first, no matter the situation. What would you have done in Lucas Owens' shoes? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice matters. If you believe in standing up for what's right, like and share this video. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories that inspire change. Thank you for watching and see you in the next one.